Okay, back with part 3 of my predictions of how the Big Ten will finish. Just to recap, in the first video I did teams 1 through 4. The second video I did teams 5 through 8, and I really feel like the Big Ten as a conference breaks down into 4 different tiers. The first tier being the first 3 teams, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Tier 2 would have been the second 3 teams, which was Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State. Tier 4 is Indiana, Northwestern, Illinois, and Purdue. And the fourth tier is Minnesota, kind of on its own island. And so to kind of give you a recap, I've got Ohio State at 1, Wisconsin number 2, Iowa number 3, Michigan State number 4, Michigan number 5, Penn State number 6, Indiana number 7, and Northwestern number 8, which takes us to number 9. And the team that I think will finish 9th in the Big Ten is Purdue. Purdue's been in the media a little bit lately with how well new quarterback Robert Marve has done in the offense. If you remember, Marve is a transfer from the University of Miami that started there a couple of years ago as a redshirt freshman when Ja'Cory Harris was a freshman there as well. There was some controversy on Marve being there. He was suspended a couple games, didn't play the bowl, left, talked that he couldn't be a quarterback in a Randy Shannon-led team. So it's kind of interesting to see him land at Purdue and be as happy as he is being up in West Lafayette, where typically people don't think coming from Miami would be necessarily a paradise. So I have Purdue at 9. I think it could be a little bit of an underrated prediction, given the fact that apparently all reports say Marve is playing that well. Offensively, they should be okay. If Marve can make plays the way that we know he can, the way that he played at a high school, then Purdue should be in a lot better situation than maybe I'm giving them credit for. We know Purdue likes to run a spread. We know that they do a pretty good job of that, and we know that they typically have good quarterbacks there. Marv is a little bit different in the sense that he's not necessarily like a Joey Elliott, a Curtis Painter, or a Drew Brees, in the sense that Marv can run pretty well too, as a dual threat quarterback out of that spread offense. Outside of Marv, Keith Smith comes back as all-conference receiver. The running game's a little bit in question. Ralph Bolden towards ACL. We don't know if he's coming back or not, or if he'll be back in time. So that could be a little bit rough for the Boilermakers. But other than that, they should be okay. A lot of the offense will depend on how well Marv is playing. They got a couple of stars back on the offensive line, and they have 2 or 3 guys there that could be pushing for all-conference performance there too. So it's an interesting situation. The best part about Purdue is their front 7 on defense, led by defensive end Ryan Kerrigan. They're going to be really strong front 7. It's going to be hard to run on them, I think. I think they're going to be able to get to the passer a lot, especially Kerrigan off the edge. The problem with Purdue, per se, is that they have nobody coming back in the secondary. No safeties, no cornerbacks. So they're going to have to cheat a little bit, maybe drop their linebackers back into coverage. They want to try to stay out of situations where they can get burned in the pass. Almost be able to shut down opposing offenses on the running attack, and really be able to sag the defense down to give as much help to their corners or safeties as they can when it comes to a passing attack. I mean, it's a little bit much of a difficult situation in the Big Ten. I know I keep harping on this theme, but I think the conference is really better relative than they had to other teams than it has been in the last couple of years. And with so many quarterbacks like Pryor, Stanzi, Tolzien, Cousins, even Chappell, even Dan Person, maybe the guys at Michigan, you're really going to have a hard time not being able to defend the pass as well as you can, and that could be Purdue's downfall a little bit. They're going to have to be solid against the pass, especially if they're not. It's going to really put a very big. I guess it's going to put a lot of pressure on Marv to make plays with his arms with his arm in order to catch up offensively. So. I think a good barometer for Purdue is going to be when they open up at Notre Dame in the first game of the season. If they really get hammered in that one, we'll kind of know that this team's a little bit behind the curve, and it's going to be a little bit more of a bumpy road with a new quarterback. But if they come out and they play really tough against Notre Dame, maybe even if they win, I don't think they have to. I think they got to play a tight game. But if they were to come out of Notre Dame and beating the Irish, I think that 9th place for Purdue is going to be an understatement. I think they're going to play that well. They do play Ball State and Toledo early. Those are going to be decent MAC teams. and so they have a decent go of it early on. If they can navigate that away, then I think they're going to be pretty good. So ninth place for now. They could do a lot better. I could be underselling them a little bit, but I think they have some question marks offensively, and they're really hurting in the secondary. So that leaves with my last Tier 3 team at number 10. I have Illinois. Illinois is interesting because they kind of went through some period of transition this past season, but did not get rid of their head coach, Ron Zook. Instead, they brought in 2 new coordinators, one offensive coordinator, one defensive coordinator. I'm really interested to see the offense with Paul Petrino, who had been the offensive coordinator under his brother Bobby Petrino at Louisville and Arkansas. And those teams had some pretty incredible offensive numbers. It'll be interesting to see how Paul Petrino adjusts to that. Offensively, Illinois is going to struggle a little bit. They lost their 2 best players, quarterback Juice Williams and wide receiver Aurelius Benz, or Aurelius Ben, I should say, not Benz. I'm thinking of Broderick Benz, the defensive end for Iowa. But Aurelius Ben leaves as their best playmaker. If you're looking for silver linings and gray clouds, those guys were injured a little bit last year, and that allowed Illinois to rely on some other weapons. Mike LeSure was a solid running back along with Jason Ford. Those guys had great yard per carry statistics when they were asked to run the ball. Those guys come back. They're hurting it at quarterback. I think they have some. They did get some opportunities to get, who are they? Eddie McGee and Jacob Karras some time under center. Nathan Shieldhouse is kind of the projected starting quarterback. So they're just kind of a little bit hurting there. They lose some playmakers. They add some runners. That's going to help the offense, but I think when you lose, your best playmaker and a 3-4 year starter quarterback, there's going to be some downtime. Plus, with Petrino coming in, you're going to learn a whole different offensive system, and as much as they, could be excited in Illinois, that's definitely some time for some transition. Their schedule is going to get off to a rough start. They open with Missouri, which is going to be really hard, and most likely will wind up with a loss. Even though they do play Southern Illinois and Northern Illinois in back-to-back games, which they should win, they start Big Ten play by playing Ohio State, then they're at Penn State, then they're at Michigan State. They come home to play Indiana and Purdue, and then go back on the road to Michigan, and then come back home to play Minnesota. It's not a stretch to think that Illinois could potentially be 2 wins and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 losses, and if they get off to 2-3, 2-4, 2-5. I think it's easy just to take that momentum train into Disasterville. I'm not sure that Zook can survive another losing season, although it would be interesting if they allowed him to hire new coordinators and then get rid of him after one season with those coordinators. It's either Illinois is kind of assuming that Zook is a solid coach and needed the new coordinators, need to shake things up, or they're thinking, hey, we're giving you new coordinators, and if you can't get it done in 1 year, then we're just going to junk the whole system. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. Illinois does return 7 on offense, and they get a big boost on defense, and they get a big boost with middle linebacker Martez Wilson coming back. I know Zook last year said that if Wilson didn't lead them in tackles a year ago, that Illinois would be in trouble, and he was injured, so he didn't lead them in tackles, and Illinois ended up 3-9. So they definitely were in trouble. They get him back. Outside of that, they don't have a lot of other players outside of Wilson that can be considered, big-time legitimate defensive stars. So they could struggle a little bit on defense. They did give up over 30 points per game last year, and that's, something that's, no matter how good you are coming down from that, even if you improve by a touchdown, you're still 23, 24 points a game given up. So that'll be tough to come over and get through with. So that takes me to the team that I think will finish last in the Big Ten, and it's no surprise that it's Minnesota. Really excited when Tim Brewster was hired at Minnesota, and his first year, he took him to a 1-11 record when Glenn Mason left, and Brewster was coming in, changing up the offense a little bit, more of a spread attack, and I think that was exciting for Minnesota, and he took them to back-to-back bowl games in the last couple of years that he's coached after the 1-11 situation in 2007. Now, the problem is this season doesn't look very good for Brewster. He returns 9 on offense, which is great, but it wasn't a very effective offense. Adam Weber comes back at quarterback, but Weber last year only completed 52% of his passes, had more interceptions than touchdowns. He lost Eric Decker, which is probably his best wide receiver. on the team. The runners are okay. I mean, Dwayne Bennett comes back, and that's a solid runner who did a pretty decent job. Should get the load of the carries this year, but for the most part, it's just a team with not great players on offense. Weber has to really step up his game huge and really cut down on the mistakes, make better passes, complete more passes, and just become a better team overall. They only scored 20.9 points a game last year, and so that it's just something that they weren't very good, and they'll have to really improve on that. The problem with Minnesota might be the defense, where they only return 2 starters, and those 2 starters are their safeties. So you're basically telling me that it's a defense playing in the Big Ten that has to replace their entire front 7 and their corners. I mean, I said this before. I think the league is better relative than they have been to other Big Tens in the past, and I think Minnesota going down, it's just going to get so hard for them. The offenses in the Big Ten should be just incredibly explosive, and because of that, you're telling me that Minnesota, has an offense that scored 20 points a game last year and a defense that has nothing back. It just is a recipe for disaster. Throwing on top of that is the idea behind that Minnesota might possibly have the most difficult schedule in the country, not just the conference. They open up at Middle Tennessee State, who a lot of people think are going to win the Sun Belt. They have to welcome Minnesota in, or not Minnesota, they have to welcome USC in as a home game, which they pretty much virtually have no chance at winning. They play Northern Illinois at home, who's going to be a decent MAC team. Their Big Ten schedule is just painful. They play at Wisconsin, they're at Michigan State, but their home games are Iowa, Ohio State, Penn State, Northwestern, a lot of games that they might have been able to win at home come on the road. Like maybe they could have had a shot at Illinois, maybe they could have had a shot at Purdue, but as those are road games, I don't see how Minnesota can win those. So they're having a rough time. Really like Tim Brewster, think that he could do a good job, but this might very well be his second 1-11 season in 4 years in Minneapolis. I don't know if he can survive that. I haven't heard that he's completely on the hot seat or if this seat's even warm, but I think for the most part it's going to be another tough year to be a Minnesota fan. So there's my top 11. I think if you're talking about overrating or maybe underrating, my overrating, I off the top of my head, I think maybe Indiana at 7 is a stretch. No one really expects Indiana to be a great football team. I think that it's going to have to be kind of a do-or-die year for them in that respect. I might be overrating a little bit Michigan State at number 4. I definitely know that a lot of people are predicting Penn State to be higher, so I could be underrating Penn State. And 2 other teams I think I could be underrating. One is Purdue. If Robert Marv is as good as everyone says, I think Purdue could be really, really good. I think their schedule is set up to where they can do some damage, at least to win 6 or 7 games and get bowl eligible. So picking them 9th is definitely a spot where they could definitely go up. The other team that I think I've underrated a little bit is Iowa at number 3. I mean, how can you underrate a team that you're picking to be 3rd in the Big Ten? But the reason why is Iowa has a perfect setup in order to go 12-0. And I'm not saying that it'll be disappointing if they go 12-0, because last year, Iowa was 11-2, won a BCS Bowl when they beat Georgia Tech in the Orange Bowl. But in my opinion, if they do not go 12-0, it'll be somewhat of a letdown. They get Wisconsin and Ohio State both at home. They have an incredible defensive unit. Their quarterback's back. They got runners. They got a great offensive line coach. Even if they have to rebuild it a little bit, they got receivers. I think their situation is probably the best it's been since Ferentz has been in Iowa in order for them to maybe break through and win that Big Ten and potentially play for a BCS championship. So hope you guys like these videos. They're fun for me to do. Keeps it interesting for me. So okay.